There are moments on live television that feel less like an interview and more like history unfolding right before our eyes. One of those moments came when Piers Morgan sat across from Husam Zomlot, the Palestinian ambassador to the United Kingdom. What started as a debate about Gaza and Israel quickly became something much deeper, a calm but powerful exchange that revealed not only the sharp differences in narrative, but also the weight of human suffering behind every word. The stage was set in classic Piers Morgan style. He thrives on confrontation, on pressing his guests with questions that cut like knives, never giving them space to breathe. He's built his reputation on making politicians sweat and celebrities stumble. And yet, when Husam Zomlot walked into that studio, it wasn't anger or aggression he carried, it was calm, composure, and conviction. That calmness would become the sharpest weapon of all. The conversation opened with what Piers often does best: direct, blunt questions. He demanded condemnation of violence, condemnation of Hamas, and he wanted it fast, without hesitation, without context. But Zomlot, with the eyes of millions watching, didn't flinch. He condemned the killing of innocent civilians, Israeli and Palestinian, but refused to allow the conversation to be stripped of history. This wasn't just about one attack, he reminded the world. It was about decades of occupation, blockades, and despair. His voice carried no rage, only steadiness. And that in itself unsettled Piers. Because where others might have cracked under the pressure, Zomlot stood firm, his tone almost parental, as if reminding the world of truths it had chosen to forget. And this is where the exchange became extraordinary. Instead of shouting back, instead of matching Piers' intensity, Zomlot leaned into calmness. He spoke of his own family, of relatives killed, of generations scarred by violence. He didn't present statistics as shields, he presented humanity. He wasn't arguing numbers. He was holding up the mirror of suffering. And in that moment, the balance of power in the interview shifted. The audience could feel it. Online, clips began circulating almost instantly. Comments poured in. This man is schooling Piers without raising his voice. He's not just speaking for Palestine, he's speaking for every oppressed voice. The calmness, the refusal to be baited became its own form of strength. But Piers wasn't done. He leaned forward, cutting in with interruptions, trying to corner Zomlot. Do you condemn Hamas? He repeated. Do you accept that Israel has the right to defend itself? It was the classic Piers technique: repeat, pressure, dominate. Yet, the ambassador remained unshaken. Yes, he condemned the killing of innocents. Yes, he condemned violence on all sides. But he would not accept a framing that erased decades of Palestinian suffering. And here's the remarkable part. Every time he pushed back, he did it with reason, not rage. Instead of being the defensive guest, Zomlot turned the mirror around. Why? He asked calmly. Do you not demand the same accountability of Israel? That question, delivered without anger, landed harder than any shout could. This was no ordinary interview. It was a clash not of tempers, but of narratives. On one side, a host known for cutting through excuses. On the other, a representative who refused to let his people be reduced to a headline. And slowly, you could see it, Piers' usual dominance wasn't working. The silence between words began to matter. The pauses stretched longer. The tension wasn't about shouting, it was about what wasn't being said. Because in those pauses, the weight of Gaza's suffering hung heavy. And as the minutes passed, something rare happened on live TV. The interviewer, not the guest, seemed unsettled. Piers, who normally thrived on control, was being met with a composure he couldn't shake, and viewers could sense it. They weren't just watching a debate, they were witnessing a power shift. But this was only the beginning. What came next would take the exchange from powerful to unforgettable. And then, the tension began to rise. Piers Morgan, leaning forward in his chair, tried once again to take control of the conversation. His voice sharpened, his tone more demanding. Ambassador, I'm asking you directly, he pressed. Do you accept Israel's right to defend itself? For many guests, this would have been the breaking point, a moment to stumble, to retreat, to give a soundbite, just to end the pressure. But Husam Zomlot didn't blink. He looked directly at Piers.com as ever, and said, every nation has the right to protect its people. But what you call defense, for decades, has meant occupation, bombardment, and siege. The words landed like a hammer, not because they were shouted, but because they were undeniable. Zomlot wasn't playing politics. He was reframing the entire narrative live on air. Piers cut in again, his trademark interruptions flying fast. So you're refusing to condemn Hamas. You're refusing to accept Israel's right. His tone grew louder, but Zomlot's never did it. That's what made the contrast so striking, the interviewer growing hotter, the ambassador staying cooler. The viewers watching could feel the dynamic shifting. Online reactions exploded. Some accused Piers of badgering, others praised Zomlot for holding his ground, but nearly everyone agreed. This wasn't the Piers Morgan show we were used to. Something was different here. Because instead of Piers steering the conversation, Zomlot was quietly taking the wheel. He began telling stories, personal ones, about his own family displaced, about friends killed in airstrikes, about children growing up under the shadow of drones instead of sunlight. These weren't statistics anymore. They were memories, lived experiences, and with each story, the atmosphere in the studio thickened. Suddenly, the conversation wasn't about politics or strategy, it was about humanity. Piers, for once, had no interruption that could erase the weight of those words. But Zomlot didn't stop there. He challenged the double standards head-on. Why, he asked, his voice steady, are Palestinians always asked to condemn, to justify, to explain their pain, while Israel is never held to the same standard? Why is one side allowed endless excuses, and the other side only endless questions? That moment was electric. The studio air seemed to freeze. Even Piers paused, a pause that spoke louder than any argument. For a few seconds there was silence, the kind of silence that makes viewers lean closer to the screen, knowing something historic has just been said. But Piers, true to his nature, wasn't going to let it rest. He pushed again, this time more personal. Do you not see that Hamas is the reason your people are suffering? Do you not see that their terrorism is what provokes these responses? It was sharp, almost accusatory. But Zomlot's reply came, like water over fire.com/unshaken. Do you not see, he countered, that my people have been suffering long before Hamas even existed? That children in Gaza know nothing but blockade, nothing but bombs. If you want to talk about root causes, let us start at the beginning, not the middle. And in that exchange, something remarkable happened. The entire debate shifted from the soundbite Piers wanted to the truth Zomlot insisted on telling. For viewers at home, this was no longer just another fiery Piers Morgan interview. This was a masterclass in composure. A man refusing to be boxed in, refusing to let his narrative be dictated by another's framing. The minutes ticked by, but the gravity only deepened. Each time Piers pressed harder, Zomlot answered softer, and that softness carried more weight than the loudest outburst ever could. And as the segments stretched on, you could sense it. This wasn't just about one night on TV. This was about decades of history being voiced in one calm, steady tone. But what came next would elevate this interview from powerful to unforgettable. Because soon the ambassador's words would break through the noise, striking at the very heart of the global conversation. And just when viewers thought the conversation had reached its peak, the real turning point arrived. Piers leaned in, his voice sharper than ever. Ambassador, you still haven't answered me. Why can't you just say it? Hamas are terrorists. Say it now. Do you condemn them? The demand echoed across the studio. It was the kind of question designed to corner, to trap, to force a headline. But Husam Zomlot, steady and unflinching, replied with a calmness that stunned even those who disagreed with him. I condemn the killing of civilians everywhere, he said slowly, deliberately, his eyes fixed on Piers. Whether they are Israeli, Palestinian, or any other people, no child deserves to die. No family deserves to live under bombs. But if you want to stop the killing, you must stop the conditions that create it. End the occupation, end the siege, end the endless cycle. It wasn't the answer Piers wanted. He tried to interject, but that's not the same. But Zomlot pressed on, his voice unwavering. You want me to choose words that suit your narrative, but I will not. I will speak for my people, for those who have no voice on platforms like this, and I will tell you, they are tired of being asked to apologize for their own existence. The studio fell into a silence that wasn't awkward, but heavy, the kind of silence that makes an audience realize they are witnessing something much larger than a TV debate. Viewers online erupted. Clips began circulating instantly. Hashtags trended worldwide. Some accused Piers of bullying, others praised him for asking tough questions. But almost everyone agreed on one thing: Husam Zomlot had just changed the temperature of the conversation. And then came the moment that would be replayed thousands of times. The emotional heart of the entire exchange, Zomlot speaking almost softly now, shared a story. My mother, he said, was forced from her home in 1967. She carried the key to that house until the day she died. She believed she would return, she never did. And yet, we are told to forget, to move on, to pretend as if our history never happened. The weight of those words cut through the air like a knife. You could see it even in Piers' face. For once, his trademark confidence faltered. He looked, for just a moment, not like a fiery broadcaster, but like a man confronted with something undeniable, human pain. But Zomlot wasn't finished. He leaned slightly forward, his tone firm again. You ask me about Hamas. I ask you, who will ask Israel to stop bombing children? Who will ask Israel to stop building settlements? Who will ask for accountability on both sides? If you truly want peace, start with justice. Without justice, there is no peace. The clash was extraordinary. Piers tried again to wrestle control back, but the tide had turned. This was no longer his show. This was a stage for something deeper, something rawer, and the audience felt it. Not just those in the UK, not just those in the Middle East, but around the world. People who normally dismissed interviews as political theater were suddenly leaning forward, glued to their screens, realizing this wasn't theater, this was testimony. By now 20-30 minutes had passed, but the energy hadn't faded. In fact, it was intensifying. Because what Zomlot was doing was rare. He was using calmness as his weapon, and every time Piers raised his voice, it only highlighted that contrast more as the interview moved forward. One thing became clear. This wasn't just a conversation about politics. This was a battle over narrative. Who gets to tell the story of Palestine? Who gets to define the truth? And in that studio, for once, the script was being rewritten live, but the interview wasn't over yet. The sharpest exchanges, the most unforgettable lines, were still to come. And in the final stretch, the ambassador would deliver words that resonated far beyond television. Words that would echo in debates, in protests, in history itself. The studio was charged with an energy that felt almost electric. By this point, the audience wasn't just watching an interview, they were witnessing a clash of worlds, two realities colliding on live television. Piers leaned back in his chair, almost as if he realized that his relentless fire wasn't working, but he wasn't finished. He had one last card to play. "Ambassador," he said firmly, "I respect your passion. But surely you must accept that Israel has the right to defend itself. If rockets are fired into their cities, if families are living in fear, what do you say to them?" It was the kind of question Piers Morgan thrived on. Direct, emotional, impossible to sidestep. The silence that followed seemed to stretch forever. And then Husam Zomlot answered, in a voice so steady that it carried more weight than any shout could. "Every nation has the right to defend its people," he said, "but no nation has the right to use that as an excuse to occupy, to dispossess, to destroy another people. Israel does not have the right to oppress millions, to besiege Gaza, to deny Palestinians freedom, and then call it defense. That is not defense. That is aggression wrapped in a false narrative." The studio audience shifted in their seats. You could almost feel viewers at home leaning forward. It was an answer that cut through the rhetoric and landed with force. Piers tried to respond, but Zomlot continued, his words flowing now like a floodgate had opened. "You speak of fear in Israeli cities. I do not deny their fear, but tell me, who will speak of the children in Gaza who do not live to see their 5th birthday? Who will speak of the mothers giving birth under siege, the fathers burying their sons under rubble? Who will recognize their right to live without fear? Is their life worth less?" For the first time, there was no interruption, no fiery comeback, just silence. And then, almost softly, Zomlot added, "You cannot build peace on top of injustice. You cannot demand silence from the oppressed while the oppressor continues unchecked. Justice is not optional, it is the foundation." The power of those words hung in the air, and Piers, usually so quick, so sharp, so relentless, found himself, if only briefly, without words. His eyes darted, his hand shifted on the desk, but he didn't cut in. And that moment, that pause, was more telling than anything else. The final minutes of the interview passed like a blur. Piers tried to regain control, but every answer from Zomlot seemed to resonate more deeply, not just with facts but with lived experience. He wasn't just representing statistics or politics. He was carrying a history, a people, a cause. And then came the line that would echo far beyond that studio, the closing words that would become a headline, a rallying cry, a reminder. Zomlot looked directly into the camera and said, "We are not asking for pity. We are asking for equality. We are asking for freedom. We are asking for justice. And until that day comes, we will continue to speak calmly, firmly, and without apology." The interview ended. Piers thanked him, but the usual bravado wasn't there. The camera cut away, but the conversation lingered in the air like smoke after a fire. Within hours, clips exploded online. Some called Zomlot defiant, others called him evasive, but most agreed. He had spoken with a calm power rarely seen in such interviews. Memes, debates, hashtags, the digital battlefield lit up. But one thing was undeniable: Husam Zomlot had made his mark, and that is why this interview remains unforgettable. Not because it was a shouting match, not because it was a walkout, but because it showed the world something rare, that sometimes the most powerful weapon in a debate is not volume, but calm conviction. The calm but powerful exchange